And we're going to take a look at Lesson 5 and Unit 1, which is going to focus on the market economy. So let's go ahead and get the learning targets out of the way. So the things we're going to try and accomplish in this particular lesson is going to be to explain how a market economy works. So we're going to basically do some of the fundamentals that are involved with it. We're going to listen to describe some of the advantages and disadvantages of a market economy. And then what students tend to have the most trouble with is going to be the last one, which is explain how the circular flow model works. Let's get into some fundamentals. Well, basically, it's a limited government involvement, and there's a term that we used in class that basically sums that up. It's called laissez-faire, which means hands-off approach. In a market economy, the government does not have any sort of involvement whatever. It doesn't tell you what to make. It doesn't tell you what to sell. There are no such thing as public goods or services that are created. So even things like a school that you go to, that is a public service. So in a market economy, that would not be something that's provided. It'd be up to you to go out and purchase it. Even something like a crazy idea like a country not having a military in a market economy, that would not be something that would exist. So so that would be another way of how we see some command aspects of our economic systems. What some other ways would be like essentially just the overall theme is you're on your own, and we'll take a look at that more when we do the advantages and disadvantages. We have voluntary exchange in the markets, and the thing that you need to be mindful of is that's basically anytime you go and buy something at the store, you're doing voluntary exchange. If you spend $2 on a cheeseburger at McDonald's, it's voluntary exchange because no one is forcing you to spend $2 for that hamburger or cheeseburger, and no one is forcing McDonald's to sell it for $2. You both believe that what you're giving up is worth it for what you're going to get. So for you, it's up to you. It's worth it in your opinion. Yeah, whatever. I'll give up $2 because in exchange for that, I'm gonna get that cheeseburger, and it's gonna be worth my time. And for them, they're okay with giving up the cheeseburger because they feel that the $2 that they're charging is gonna actually make that thing worth it. So we talk about competition and consumer sovereignty. So competition, we've talked about in class how consumers benefit from competition, and they do that in a number of different ways. So if you have just one, let's just say that one company was offering a service, let's just say gasoline, they could pretty much offer any price that they want, and they'd have zero to little motivation to actually improve their product. But when more people become involved, we end up having what's called competitive pricing, where if they engage in this, basically all the competitors for that product are going to try and have basically the goal of, I need to offer this product at the lowest price possible, and yet still have it at a price that's going to make me some profit, because you're not going to sit there and offer goods and services for ridiculous prices that don't make you profit, because that's going to make you go out of business. Like, oh yeah, I could go ahead if I were PlayStation and offer PlayStation 4s for $10. I mean, of course you'd sell a whole bunch of them, but how much money are you going to lose? So you have to be smart with that too. They have to try and go, well, I need to offer it at a low enough price to maybe to take some business away from Microsoft in that case. But what really happens with those two, which would also be another advantage, is that with Microsoft and Sony, is that the two of them, yeah, we're not going to have different prices. When one lowers their price, then the other one tends to match it. So what ends up happening for you to benefit from this in the end is that each of those companies are going to try and provide the very best product necessary and constantly be under the need to improve their product in order to get you to buy from them. Because if you look at Sony and Microsoft, they pretty much, the video game system is a video game system. So let's break it down from that. The graphics are, arguably the same. So basically it comes down to they have to figure out, well, how am I going to actually make it better? Then, Microsoft does it a certain way with certain things they offer that are exclusive to their consoles. And then we also have Sony that does it as well. But, we can apply this to other businesses in the market too. We had Wendy's that came out with 4 for $4, and then we've got fast food restaurants going 4 for $5. I think Hardee's just came out with this new $5 box that gets you 2 sandwiches, of fries, a cookie, and a pop, and then you have just name it, all these different things. You had get a pick 2 from McDonald's, and all of those companies have created those deals for you because they're all in competition with each other, trying to get your business. Okay, so consumer sovereignty, that portion of it basically is talking about how essentially it is the consumer that drives the market. Now, we've talked about in class before how, with a command economy, who decides what's made? Well, that's going to be the government. Well, when we get into a market economy, there's really 2 answers for it. You would say that the consumer drives the market because the producer was going to make only things that consumers want. But in the end, of course, the producer can make anything that they want. They're just not going to be silly enough to try and sell or make something that they know is not wanted. So realistically, at least as far as our class goes, I always like to argue that as far as who decides what's made inside of a market economy, it's both the consumer and the producer. It's just that the producer is going to make a smart decision and only make things that consumers want. With specialization in the markets, so specialization basically means that I'm going to be able to focus on doing what I do best. Now, this is something that doesn't exist within the market economy or the traditional economy. Because with the traditional economy, you basically are doing whatever it is that is tradition for you to carry out. When we talk about command economy, it doesn't necessarily allow for specialization. It's you're doing whatever the government tells you you're going to be doing. So with a market economy, you choose whatever it is that you do best and will make you the most money. That's the nice freedom portion within a market economy. So talking about choice, let's get to our advantages and disadvantages. So some advantages is obviously choice. I get to choose what I want. I can choose what I want to buy. I can choose what I want to make. I can choose how I want to make it. So we go back to those 3 questions that scarcity leads to. What am I going to make? Whatever I want, it's my choice. How are you going to make it? However I want. I mean, obviously you're going to also try and make it in a manner that's the most efficient because you don't want to waste resources. And then who's it going to be made for? It's really your choice. I mean, in the market economy, it's probably whoever's got the money for it. Private ownership is allowed, so I get to own things like my own business and run it how I want to. And then we even have other things like where I have private property, where inside of a command economy, we don't have that. Specialization, we already talked about that, so I needed to go in there again. And the same with competition. We've already talked about the benefits of competition. So some disadvantages is that basically something we talked about earlier, not everyone is taken care of. The thing I like to talk about in this specific example is something like, my grandma's in her late 80s. She can't work. So would in a market economy be like, "Oops, sorry, grandma, you're on your own. You're just gonna have to figure it out." No, with a command economy, we have examples of like Social Security that would help take care of those types of people. But in a market economy, it's kind of like tough luck. And then another disadvantage, there's no such thing as public goods or services. You're on your own to find those things as well. So even though it sounds ridiculous that a country would not have a military, you actually would not have one inside of a pure market economy. All right. So the last thing we're going to discuss is circular flow model, and basically that is talking about how goods and services are exchanged within a market economy. So we're going to go ahead and I'll try and use the game that we used, Econoland, to try and explain it. So my business people, that was when you had the yellow tag, that was over here. So we're going to go ahead and this is a little bit different. So on the outside, really, I'm just going to kind of say that's pretty much money being circulated. So in the game, you started off with money, and you went out and bought factors of production. Now this is resource market. Realistically, when we talk about our game, it was called the factor market. The thing with economics is there are certain terms that are interchangeable. This would be one of those. So you went out and you spent money in the resource market. And then as a result, that money went into the households. And then that money was in the household, so those would be the people who started off with the factors of production. They then went out and bought goods and services in the product market. And then because the household spent money there, that money then goes to the businesses, which they use to go ahead and buy more factors of production, and then the circle keeps going. So let's look at it in reverse. We've got the business that goes ahead and spends money inside of the product. Let's start over real quick. We have businesses that make something and go ahead and sell it in the product market. So those goods end up inside of the households. So this even says goods and services. Well, those households need to get money, so they go off and offer their factors of production within the resource market, so the factor market. And then within the factor market / resource market, because they were offering up those factors of production, the finished good or service ends up with the business, which then obviously we start all over again. They make the product and sell it inside of the product market. So hopefully you can go ahead and figure out our learning objectives, our learning targets, and if you can, you'll be just fine as far as our test coming up.